Hey everyone, welcome to the Field and Garden Podcast. I'm Jessie Graven from the Gardener's Workshop. Over the next few Saturdays, we're replaying some of our favorite episodes of the year, ones that had tons of listens because they're packed full of useful information. We hope you enjoy. Hello, and welcome to the Field and Garden Podcast. I'm Jessie Graven from the Gardener's Workshop. Today I'd like to present a conversation between Lisa Mason Ziegler and Dave Dowling from 2019, in which they tackle some of the most common challenges that people face while working to become a flower farmer. There are also some great stories in here about when Lisa and Dave were first starting their flower farming journeys, so I hope you enjoy.
Good evening, folks. Lisa Ziegler coming to you from here on the Gardener's Workshop farm here in southeastern Virginia on my little urban farm. And tonight, Dave Dowling and I are going to be talking about overcoming challenges to become a flower farmer. So, hi, Dave.
Good evening. How you doing?
I'm good. Dave and I communicate a lot via email and text, but we don't often, he's in New Jersey and I'm in southeastern Virginia. I'm going to tell you that we have been bombarded with questions, and a lot of them are the things that we're going to talk about tonight. And it is just really pretty amazing how there's so many people that really want to try to start some type of flower business, flower farming business, but they have all these little hiccups that they feel like it's just stopping them. So we're going to talk about some of those. Did you have any hiccups, Dave?
Oh, quite a few.
When
I started out really small and just went from there, and it just kept building bigger and bigger every year. But started out with nothing, no money, no tractor, no nothing, and it worked.
Me too. I read Lynn's book and it was like, okay, I think I saw a tiller out there in the garage. Steve and I had just gotten married, and the old family buildings had all kinds of stuff in it anyway. And, back when you and I started, it wasn't like it is now.
There was no internet.
I know. And do we sound old or what? It's like, nobody knew flower farming. What are you talking about? People pay for flower. You know what I mean? It was just
exactly. Yes.
It was so hard. And I come from a really big farming family. They have big farms. I think I was like the family joke for the first 5 years. Oh, there she is. The little girl thinks she's a farmer. And so, yeah, it was really, really hard. So, we're going to talk first about some of the things that might have been stoppers for us. And every one of these things on my list that was a barrier for me and or Dave, somebody has asked us about. So I asked people, so you guys be thinking, if you need to, what is your cusp? What is it that you say, I can't start my business because of, and post it so we can help you realize that there's a way to overcome it. Because let me tell you something. Owning a business, to me, is nothing more than being a fire extinguisher all day, every day. That's all you do is put out problems. That's what owning a business is, right, Dave? I mean, it is.
Yeah, whether it's a farm or a restaurant or an office, you're always dealing with problems.
All day long. I mean, and it's not, but I see them as challenges.
Yes.
So that's a good one. Charlotte just posted, how about old age? Too old. We'll talk about that too. So the first thing that's on my list, Dave, is no experience.
Right.
Well, I don't know any flower farmers that were flower farmers before they started flower farming. Right?
They might have had gardens at home. They might have had like bedding plants and gardens, but I don't know of anybody who became although there are some people who grew up in the business, if they're the second generation, there's not many of those out there who were born in a flower farm.
Yeah, I think the one I think of course, is Joe Schmidt. I think he's like a fourth generation flower farmer.
Right, and
but one
Keith Kramer, there's a few. The Milanos out in California, but there's not many.
Right.
I like to always tell the story. When I first started, I was buying seeds at the local garden center, the hardware store, And I planted larkspur. I had no idea when it was going to look like. I planted it maybe in June. Nothing ever happened. Then the next year I came home one day and there's this big, huge, tall purple flower, probably mid to late May. And I'm thinking, what is that? I didn't know what it was. And I had to go find out what is that plant that came up a year after I planted the seed, because I planted it at the wrong time. So the seed sat there all summer, germinated in the fall, overwintered. And this is one big purple larkspur plant that I don't know where it came from, except I planted a year before and didn't know what I was doing.
And it was saying, here I am, Dave.
Yes,
You can,
just one.
It's true. So, you know, I was barely a darn gardener when I started into this process. So really no experience is not a reason to not become a flower farmer. And there's just so many resources, you know, our courses, books, magazines, social media, and I use them all the time. You know, I'm still, I mean, the quarterly that comes out from the association every month, and I scroll the social media and see somebody doing something like, what are they doing? You know, so we're all still learning, right? Now, I'll talk about this just very briefly. We get a lot of questions about, well, I don't have a cooler, and I really don't think I could have a cooler for several years because I don't really have a place to put it, even if I could afford one. And I will tell you that I farmed for, 7 or 8 years with no cooler.
I did about 5 without a cooler,
Yeah, I mean, there's just certain things you would never even consider growing when you don't have a cooler. But there's lots of other things to grow, right? So a cooler is certainly something to work towards, right, Dave? Because that opens all kinds of doors.
And it's a big game changer to have one, but you can survive without one, but let your goal be to eventually get one, and fairly soon.
It's true. And figuring out too, like, if I had bought one immediately, because there are people, I do know people that have funding that go out before they know anything and buy a hoop house, buy coolers, and buy equipment. And then 2 years later, they're like, oh my gosh, this cooler is, you never say this cooler's too big, right? You always say it's too little. So I think that there's huge benefits in tightening your straps and doing this and working towards stuff and figuring out what the heck you need.
And also to start out with the coolers and tunnels and stuff, and find out in 3 or 4 years, either you're physically or mentally or emotionally not cut out for it. What do you do with it then? And you got to try and sell it. So it's better to, in my opinion, get a year or 2 under your belt and then figure out, do I really want to keep doing this?
Right.
And then get your cooler and your equipment.
It's true. I mean, it's so true. And, you know, the next thing on my list is no acreage. That is perhaps one of the most, I bet I've gotten 5 emails today about, I just have, you know, 1/8 of an acre, and I'm not looking to become a big producer, but I'd like to create, you know, some type of a bouquet subscription. I mean, 1/8 of an acre, you can really squeeze some flowers out of, right?
A lot of flowers, yes. Yes, well, when you think of how much you do on your acreage, and like Leon Carrier did forever on 2 acres, it's amazing what you can do on a small piece of property.
It's true. You know, before I had help, you know, I lived on 1.17 acres for 10 years. My house was on that, a couple of outbuildings. I had 2 smallish 1/4 acre gardens. It was unbelievable what I squeezed out of them. It almost killed me working them. And it was less than 1/2 acre, you know. And I said, I think last week or the week before on my Lisa Live, the best year I've ever had is I made $66,000 from those 2 1/4 acre gardens by myself, which meant I basically had no expenses because I grew all annuals, you know.
Right, just time and a few seeds, right.
Yeah, so I think that having a small space gives you the opportunity to learn how to farm and not overplant, not overcome yourself, because that just makes you quit in August.
Right. I hear, when I see people who are starting out new and they got 2 or 3 acres on the first or second year, and I just think they're way over their head.
Exactly.
You can't do it.
You can't. Well, I mean, you have no time to do all the other things you need to learn too. You know, you got to find customers. You got to market yourself. You got to figure out bookkeeping. You got to get legal. I mean, you know what I mean? It's like all of a sudden you just really, really can't do it. So for me, it was like a dream come true. And I know so many people that this has happened to. You have to remember, I live in the middle of the city. It was me and 200,000 residents. However, my one neighbor owned the last 40 acres of horse pasture in the city. Everything else around us was developed. I never thought we'd be able to have a piece of it. I mean, the city just made it really hard to be able to subdivide. And when that actually happened, let's see, 8 years ago, I mean, land in the city is really, you would never buy it as a farmer. I mean, it's way too expensive. But we bought an acre and a half. So then all of a sudden, I jumped from that little half an acre split in two. I all of a sudden had a huge garden. And if I'd have had that to begin with, Dave, I would not be sitting here right now. I'm pretty sure. Because I'd have planted it all. I'd have planted it. I've been overcome. Anyway, so not having a lot of space can be a gift, because then when you're successful, you can find more space. Somehow, some way. You never know what the future holds, right? So, Dave, talk about not having a greenhouse or a hoop house. When did you get your first one?
I would say probably in my year 3 or 4, I built, quote unquote, a greenhouse that was like 4 feet by 8 feet with 2x4s and cheap plastic, just to start seeds in the spring.
Oh, okay.
And then I think a year later, I built a 8 by 10 greenhouse with old windows. And then it was probably in my 6th or 7th year, maybe 5th year, that I built a real greenhouse. It was a 30 by 50 foot greenhouse. But for the first years, I used it just for starting plants.
Right.
And it wasn't even a full-size greenhouse or a fancy one.
Right.
But you can do it without by starting under lights, which is what you do.
Right. And so you were kind of out in the rural area, right?
I was in the country, yes.
And
still is farmland there.
Yeah. So, you know, so we're both extremes. Here I am in the city. I can have a greenhouse if I apply for the city ordinance. It's a very tough thing to do. So I just was too afraid to do that. And I just started growing indoors under lights. I know a lot of people. Emily, that I interviewed, that we had a interview with her several weeks ago. She does not soil blocks. She does plug trays. She does it just like I do, racks and grow lights. And she started over 70,000 seedlings, I think it was, she told me last year.
Yeah.
You know,
it's
so
amazing.
you can do it, right? And then I know that you also, by the time I started coming to visit you, you had hoop houses. How long, and then first off, explain what the difference between a greenhouse and a hoop house is.
Well, a greenhouse would have some kind of heat source, usually a furnace, and has exhaust fans and either roll-up sides or some kind of mechanical ventilation to cool it off. Whereas the high tunnel is basically a greenhouse structure with the plastic, but with no, it usually has no electric in it, so there's no heat, no furnace, no fans to cool it. So it's ventilated by roll-up sides. Some of them have a rooftop vent. They leave the end doors open in the summertime, but it's basically a much cheaper because you're not paying for all those furnaces and equipment.
Right.
And it's usually sometimes a lighter gauge piping and so forth, the structure. And often they're temporary. You just put them up for the summer and take them down for the winter, or at least take the plastic off for the winter so you don't have to worry about the snow.
Well, yeah, I mean, and there's so many choices. Just hearing you just list the different, to know, isn't there different, perhaps better houses for different regions for the weather, right?
Yeah, there's ones that you can leave in Canada and Maine and let it snow on it and don't have to worry about it. And there's ones that if you put it up in Canada and let it snow, or Northern America and let it snow, it's going to collapse unless you go out and shovel the snow off all night.
Right.
So yeah, they are very different.
And so
different qualities.
You need to either have a lot of knowledge before you purchase it, or you need to have access to a lot of knowledge, meaning experience, wisdom, have flower farming friends and mentors that can help you decide. I know that you have helped several people put up greenhouses.
Build houses, yes.
I know that you have a lot of experience with that. But that's not something that you go into flower farming thinking, oh shucks, I've got to, have that immediately. You know what I mean?
You don't need it right away.
Right. And but you know, I'll tell you, the consensus out there is you can't do this without a greenhouse. You can't. When I tell people that I grow everything in the field, they've looked at my photos or they've either seen our flowers somewhere. It's like, when I say that, they look at me like I have 3 heads. They don't believe it, you know, that you can do it. And it is so possible. I just posted a little video on Instagram and Facebook. I was going through pictures and I came across trailers of flowers. They're really very beautiful. And all of that stuff was grown outside, and they're pristinely perfect, right? So
Yeah.
I think people just, you need to hear this, folks. And doesn't mean you can't get a greenhouse in 2 years, but like Dave said, you got to get some experience. Are you going to do this, right?
Yeah. And one other thing I want to point out, when I did build my greenhouses and tunnels, for the most part, I paid for them as I went. So I didn't borrow money for them. One of them I put on a credit card and paid it off before the season was over, but I paid for them as I went. I didn't, you know, I built one every other year basically and would pay for it as I went.
So you saying how you paid for it along the way, I mean, that's the gift of getting in without a lot of obligation. And I think more so than any other business, you can do that. I mean, I did it. I had no money when I started. I
started with nothing. I bought $20 worth of seed.
Exactly. I mean, fortunately, my husband came with tillers and this land.
I borrowed a tiller.
And, you know, so it's just, I just want people to calm down and not feel like they have to rush out and spend a lot of money, because that is, and that's the other thing, startup money. But I want to go back. I skipped over delivery vehicle, and I want you to talk about that. But the startup money, it's so easy for people to get in debt instantly now. So tell us, I remember seeing a pickup truck on your property and how you needed another delivery truck, and so you kind of made do.
I built a box on the back. For the first 4 or 5 years or longer, I had built a temporary thing on the back of my truck that was basically the sides panels were tables that were tables for the market. So and it had a cloth top on it and cloth back. But when I got to the market, I took off the tables, and all my stuff was in the truck, would unload it on the tables and sell, then put the empty tables back in the truck to go home. But after 4 or 5 years, that wasn't sturdy enough, so I built a bigger box that was actually bolted to the truck that held tables slid in the side of the truck, outside of the panels. So it was a thing that could hold plants, flowers, the tables, tents, everything went in that truck. And it was just a Chevy S10 truck, not a very big truck. But it was a truck that had an extended cab in the front. So when during the week, when I was making deliveries to the florist, if it was a small order, I could put it behind the seat of the truck. And of course, in the front seat and the passenger side. So I didn't have the whole big box on the back of the truck driving around all the time. But yeah, you can improvise and make what you have work. I've seen people using a Subaru Outback as a flower delivery vehicle. As long as it's tall enough to get the flowers in there, it works.
It's true. So, and for me, I had a 4-door sedan. My first trips to the florist was in the back seat of, you know, the 4-door. I didn't even have a hatchback kind of situation. So you can really make up for that. So another question I have is, I have heard from a lot of people that have full-time jobs that really want to do this. I did it for a year after my regular job.
Same here. My first year, I had another job.
It was not easy, but I did it. And oh my goodness, to come home in the evening and hit the, you know, fields, and you know, it can be done. And I tell you, one of the things that the very first session or the very first class in my course is all about the business side of things. Well, one whole session, I think it's more than one session, maybe 2, talks about making time in your life, meaning really looking at what you're spending your time doing. Because a lot of times we waste, and I do it. I mean, I really try to go through the steps that I share with them at least once a year, because I find that it's like, I'll find myself getting caught up doing things that really don't matter to the business. If I want to do them, I need to do them in the evening when it's not work time. So I think that helping people focus helps a whole lot. But I know it's hard. I mean, with kids, it is really hard. We have several moms that have been students that I followed along, and I saw that Janice is on here, Janice Harris from Canada. She's a mom of 3, I think. And
3, yeah, 3 kids.
You just really figure it out, and that's part of the community that you develop when you start flower farming and in these different groups, whether it's our Facebook pages or other Facebook. The moms tend to cling to each other to figure these things out. And didn't you say didn't Janice have a nanny? Somebody had a nanny.
I don't know if Janice, I know Mimi Davis has a nanny, and so is another girl in Baltimore, in Frederick, Maryland, has a nanny, or a babysitter, you know, like daycare. And I'm thinking of Paula Rice out in Idaho, 9 kids that all grew up on the farm helping.
Yeah, you
and
know how
Dad
I introduced
Dad
her.
had an off the farm job. Yeah.
Paula, mother of 9. Holy cow! Yes.
Yes.
So it can. It is just a matter of doing things differently, thinking outside of the box, right? And
yep.
You know, the other thing that I really thought was my big barriers, I didn't have a tractor for years. But here's the thing about not having a tractor. If you live where I live in the middle of the city, who would have ever dreamed that there was a tractor for hire in the newspaper that would show up at your house for $50, $100, $200 even, and till your garden for you? And if you live out in the country, you're even more likely to have somebody with a tractor, right? When did you get a tractor?
Yeah. I never actually had my own tractor. I used a tractor, an old 1950-something Farmall that my brother had.
Really?
But I didn't use it for the first 10 years. Yeah, it wasn't mine. I borrowed his, but I didn't use it for the first 10 years because I had nothing to hook up to it to use. It wasn't until I bought a 4-foot tiller then I used his tractor to run the tiller. And that's the only equipment I ever used was the tiller on the back of his old 1954 International Harvester.
So it's
Farmall tractor.
It's possible. You know, it's definitely.
Oh yes, possible. Yes.
It's definitely possible, and so don't let that tractor, not having a tractor, really stop you. So Dave, here's one that I keep hearing. There's just nowhere to sell flowers where I am. Go ahead.
People say that, and I've met people who before have been in areas where they have no marketing, no place to market near them. And sometimes you either have to be creative and find a new way to market other than the typical farmer's market or florist, or you need to go somewhere else, drive an hour and a half, and sell a lot of flowers to the florist in the big city or to a bigger farmer's market. I know a grower that's north of Baltimore, she delivers into DC. It's over an hour drive each way, but she'll sell them hundreds and hundreds of dollars worth of flowers.
Right. I just think my mind will not stop thinking about ways to sell flowers, you know, and that is something that if you want to grow flowers, you can figure out a way who to sell them to. I mean, I just keep saying $7 billion a year, y'all. They are out there. The buyers are out there.
I know somebody down in Southwest Virginia in the hills of the Appalachian Mountains, where she's on a really small country road, barely has a yellow line down the road. It's that small. She has a stand at the end of her driveway and sells dozens and dozens of bouquets a week, has people that drive a half hour to come get them because she has really good flowers. And they come and she sells literally hundreds of dollars worth of flowers at the end of her driveway every week.
And you know, think about what expenses she doesn't have doing that. You know, I mean, I tell people, so, because I mean, I hear you know, we sold to florists for years. I never sold directly to a wholesaler. And, you know, people say, oh, well, you don't get any money from a wholesaler. I said, well, you know, but you have to think about that. If the wholesaler is willing to show up to your farm and pick up everything you've got once a week, that means no delivery truck insurance. You know, there's just, you have to weigh all of these things. And
there are quite a few wholesalers who will do that because they have the trucks driving around to make their deliveries.
Exactly.
And they'll just add your farm as a pickup instead of a delivery.
Yes. So,
and especially in more rural areas where there's not the big, huge wholesaler in like Baltimore or Philadelphia or Boston. But if you're out in the real country, you're more likely to have a wholesaler in that area that's a small wholesaler that will be willing to pick up from you.
So let's see, what else were we thinking about? No help. Boy, that's a common problem with people. I know you had a lot of youngsters work for you, didn't you?
But you don't need help right off the bat. I didn't have my first hired help until probably year 3 or 4. And then I hired somebody that was part-time that I met her at a cut flower meeting. Until then, I did it all by myself. And it can be done. You know, if you're only a half acre, you should be able to do it by yourself, because the general rule of thumb is an acre per person. So once you get up to 2 or 3 acres, you probably need help. But 1 acre, you should be able to do it by yourself.
It's true. And again, starting small and building up and learning how to farm and manage and do maintenance also makes all the difference in the world. And, you know, something that Dave and I texted about today was how not having support from perhaps your family. And he said, oh, that'd be a can of worms. Well, but I think that is something that really is really important to be talked about.
It's very true, yes.
Because if your family or whoever you live with or someone that's in your life that you spend time with is not on board with this, it would be a very difficult battle. And, you know, I mean, I was very fortunate. I had Steve was like, go, 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 do it. I mean, he was willing to eat cereal basically for 2 years when I was trying to figure this out because I was so overwhelmed in the beginning. But it would be difficult. So that is something to definitely consider. If you have reluctant people in your family, you know, It needs to be a family decision because it is your life. It's in the back, it's outside your windows, right? Because if they're reluctant before you start, you haven't seen anything yet.
It's going to get worse, right?
Yeah, it's only going to get worse. And while I totally believe that a single person can do this all by themselves, you know, because when you're single, there's a lot less responsibilities. There's not a mountain of laundry to be done, you know, so forth and so on. So I just feel like that is definitely part, and I feel that way about any business. You cannot go into a business without everybody that's in your life and directly involved with you being on board with it.
Yes, because having your own business is nothing like having a job.
Exactly.
Where you go to job, work 9 to 5 and go home and forget about it. You have a business, whether it's any kind of business, you're involved with it and you're always thinking about it, and your family should approve and be supportive.
Yes. So, and then somebody just posted on the feed here, and I'll go back and look at the feed in just a minute, about too old. I don't think, how old was Ruth Moore? Remember her?
Oh, she kept farming. She's one that grew up on a farm, but she used to come to every conference.
Yep.
And drove her tractor, worked on a farm until the summer she died, I think. And she was in her 80s when she was still going strong.
I think she was
90. She was up there, but yeah, she was amazing. Great woman.
And
but there are lots of people. I know lots of people who have started this in their late 40s and in their 50s and even early 60s, and they start at that point in their life. My thing, as long as you're at least halfway physically active and able to do things,
right,
farming will make it easier and better. It's like the best gym there ever was. So as long as you as long as you are physically able to do the work to start out, you'll be fine. And that's the biggest thing.
You know, several years ago, I had a gal that worked here who was a big yoga nut. She taught us stretches and stuff to do. And people say, doesn't your back hurt all the time? I mean, I'm bent over. I weed. My knees are gone. But I work. I don't plant. I will tell you that. Bobo does all the planting. I stopped planting about 7 years ago. But I do all the weeding and all the harvesting pretty much. And, you know, there are ways to manage that, right? If you're reasonably physically fit, you can do it.
Right.
And it is the best. One person that works for me is in her late 60s, and she is down on her knees, you know, I mean, and she feels like this is her exercise. Who needs to go for an hour walk at night when you get home? Heck no. So yeah, I feel like if you go about it in the right way, then flower farming can be part of your physical fitness. So I don't think too old. And then somebody else posted on here about being a single parent. That can be a challenge, or it could be a help, right?
Depends how old the kid is.
Yeah.
You know, if the kids are old enough to be on their own, it's one thing. It's a 3 or 4-year-old that you have to watch constantly. But if it's a 7 or 8-year-old, have them help. Make it fun.
So I agree, but I think little ones definitely need supervision to let you feel. I mean, whether you have to have somebody come to the farm to watch and to help out. Again, it's a business, but yet it's a home business. I don't get anything else done when I'm farming. I might be able to throw some laundry in, but other than that, I mean, you're at work, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, all these little hiccups, as I call them, are like excellent preps for going into business, because going into business is not what people think, right? I mean, were you surprised, Dave? I was totally surprised.
It is work, a lot of planning, a lot of thinking, but it's not that hard once you get down to it. You just got to roll your sleeves up and do it.
You sell more than you spend. That's the key. You have to not, it's real easy to spend a lot of money.
Yes.
And I mean, but you do have to spend some money to make
money. You got to buy some seeds and some plants and buckets and that kind of stuff, but you don't have to have thousands of dollars to get started. You could start a flower farm on $300 or $400 the first year and just buy nothing but seeds.
It's true.
Sunflowers, zinnias, ageratum, and celosia. That's it. You could get by with just that in the first year.
And then at the end of the season, you have money. You know what I mean? You have extra, you have income, and
you have seed money for next year.
That's how cute was that, right? So Dave, talk about something while I look back here.
Okay. I just, like when I first started growing flowers, I had no intention of becoming a flower farmer, but I had one day been riding my bike and saw someone selling cosmos bunches at a farmer's market. And I thought, they're paying money for that. I've got that growing at the end of my driveway. And it's kind of a little thought in the back of my mind. And like, so the following year I met Leon Carrier, who's a flower farmer in Maryland, and he was growing flowers in his yard, basically a big yard. And I figured if he can do it, I can do it. And the following year I started doing it. And again, I never thought it was going to get to what it became. But you can start out small and just build from there. So and get as big as you want, or hold it at a smaller scale or smaller size if you want to. You don't have to get real big.
I mean, and that's kind of the joy of owning your own business. You know, when I first
started, make it what you want.
I'm not even sure what I thought when I first started, but I was just thinking I wanted to quit my job and stay home and garden, basically, is what I wanted to do. And I wanted to generate a little bit of money. But I think because I'm now circling around, you can make this as little or as big, just like you just said. And like for me, I went from little and got bigger and bigger and bigger, and then got pretty big. I mean, we were pumping some flowers out here. I had 6 people cutting flowers, and it was wonderful. And that allowed me to invest in a lot of things that I would have never had if I hadn't done that. But now I'm coming back to where it's pretty much just our members only market. And it is a dream come true. You know, I mean, you can make $20,000 or $25,000 a year having people come to your farm or your place and pick up their flowers. And, you know, I mean, it's like now you get to I think I'm doing now what people think flower farming is about. And so that's the gift of doing this. You can have a stand at the end of your driveway, or you can go gangbusters and start selling to 23 florists, you know?
Right. Or do like I one year was doing 9 different farmers markets throughout the week.
Oh my gosh, you've got to be
That was a lot.
me.
I only went to 5 of them myself, and the rest had employees go to, but yeah, it was a lot.
I mean, it is so easy to fall in, isn't it? I mean,
you just want to do more and more and more, right?
It's true, because what you find is when you start growing good quality flowers, you're doing it pretty professionally, you know what I mean? You're set up as a business.
Oh, yeah.
You never have enough. But I mean, to me, to say, okay, I want to make enough money to pay the mortgage for 6 months this year. I mean, what a huge relief on a family budget that would be, right? Or to send your kids to private school or whatever. And so, yeah, it's really a doable thing. And I think that there's just so many opportunities. But, you know, I live here in what was once called the Colony. It was a Mennonite community, which we're still Mennonites here, and I'm a Mennonite. But anyway, there's a story of about back in the 30s, there were two sisters that lived down at the end of the road to down here where I am. And the two of them raised gladiolas. And they sold enough gladiolas to buy a brand new, what was an old kind of car? It was a real funny name car, but it was like a big deal. A, that they got a car, and B, that they made all the money selling flowers. I mean, is that not awesome? I mean, you can do it. So, Debbie, regarding initial investment, what about row covers and hoops for them? Do you have an estimate for how much would be necessary to start with? Well, I didn't use hoops and row covers. Shoot, I didn't even know about them for years.
Yeah, I didn't use it. No.
And so I initially, and I encourage people, especially when they're just learning to farm with cool flowers, especially, is to only grow cool flowers, fall plant cool flowers that are hardy in your zone, so you don't have to provide any kind of shelter, right?
Right. I never used row cover out in the field unless it was something that had come up, a spring planted plant with a really late frost.
So you don't have to have hoops and row cover. It just depends on how much you're growing. I mean, you can figure out if you're going to have how many 50-foot or 150-foot beds. You would have to go in and figure that out. But I want to tell you, Debbie, that you do not have to have row covers. I met someone at a work conference this week from Norfolk, and she couldn't believe that you had the business you had. I mean, yeah, I'm in the middle of the city. Anything's possible, y'all. And that's the wonderful thing about being a business owner, is you make the call and you can figure it out. I'm planning to start in the spring. I won't be able to do the fall planting for spring. Should I plan to start this spring or wait until next year? You should never wait, in my opinion.
Never wait.
Something. So as soon as you can get started, go for it. Is a cooler really a must have when you grow tulips and narcissus? I'll let you talk.
With tulips, yes, because you have to pick tulips every day and they need a cooler. Although if you're doing a small amount, when I first did them, before I planted a lot of tulips and peonies, and went in my kitchen refrigerator. Everything came out, the ketchup, mustard, mayonnaise, everything was out. Take out the shelves and stack them full of flowers. You might only be in there for 2 or 3 days at a time, but that's what I did until I had a real cooler.
It's true. If you don't have anything else, Dave.
I think that's it for the night.
Okay, thegardenersworkshop.com. So, hey, till we meet again. Ciao.
All right.
Okay, welcome back. As you may know, both Lisa and Dave offer online flower farming training courses through the Gardener's Workshop. They each host a 6-week course that is only offered once annually. You can join the waitlist for those courses on our website and then be notified when they come back around in the late summer and fall. But also, Lisa Ziegler offers several on-demand online workshops that are shorter and more specific to a certain topic, such as seed starting or starting a cut flower garden. To find out more about those, you can go to thegardenersworkshop.com and click on online courses, then go to on-demand workshops, and you'll find them there. I'll put links to those here in the show notes as well. Well, thank you for joining me here on the Field and Garden podcast today. I'm Jessie Graven with the Gardener's Workshop, and I hope you have a fabulous day.